Frederick Skinner was born on March 20th, 1904 in Saskatchewan, Pennsylvania. His father, William, was a lawyer. His mother, Grace, she worked at home. He had an older brother, but he died at the age of 16 of cerebral hemorrhage. In 1936, Skinner married Yvonne Blue, which would lead him to two daughters, Julie and Deborah. B.F. Skinner attended Hamilton College in New York, where he studied to be a writer. Skinner wrote for his school newspaper, but his work was not accepted. As an atheist, Skinner criticized the religious school he attended. After graduating, Skinner tried to become a professional writer. He sent 3 short stories to famous poet Robert Frost. Frost responded with encouragement, and Skinner continued to write. After 2 years, Skinner had failed to become a pro writer and instead began to study psychology at the prestigious Harvard. At Harvard, Skinner developed the Skinner box. The Skinner box included an electric grid, a loudspeaker, lights, and a responsive lever, a food dispenser. Using rats, Skinner was able to examine behavior patterns as the rat learned how to get the food. After receiving a doctorate degree from Harvard, Skinner published The Behavior of Organism in 1938. In it, Skinner described what he had called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is, quote, changing behavior by the use of reinforcement which is given after the desired response, period, quote. Later in life, Skinner taught at the University of Minnesota. Here he used the theory of behavior to train pigeons to serve as guides for bombing runs during World War II. Skinner's project was canceled, but he was able to teach the pigeons how to play ping pong. After his work for the armed forces, Skinner began to work on his invention, the baby tender. This invention was basically a metal crib that was temperature controlled. It was supposed to simplify the lives of parents by not needing to wrap the baby in blankets while sleeping. Skinner and his wife used the baby tender to raise their second child, Deborah. This invention would never become popular because the box would easily overheat and the parents would have to pay more attention to their child. In 1945, Skinner moved away from his inventions to work in education. He first became the chair of the psychology department at the University of Indiana. 2 years later, he returned to Harvard as a professor where he remained for the rest of his life. While being a professor at Harvard, Skinner began to write more and more. In his books, he applied his behavioral theories to real-life society. He wrote books such as Walden 2 in 1948, Beyond Freedom and Dignity in 1971, and About Behaviorism in 1974. His books were mainly about a utopian society in which people were led to be good citizens through behavioral modification, which was achieved through operant conditioning. Skinner's writing pieces were heavily criticized because they implied humans had no free will and could be simply controlled by conditioning. One of his famous critics was fellow psychologist Noam Chomsky. As Skinner became older, he stayed away from writing novels. Instead, Skinner began to write his own biography. Skinner was diagnosed with leukemia within 1 year. Burris Frederick Skinner died in his home of Cambridge, Massachusetts on August 18, 1990.